Welcome to Momma-Sota, the podcast where we dive headfirst into the beautiful mess of motherhood. I'm your host, Monica Eickman, and I'm here to keep it real. In a world that changes by the minute, parenting can often feel like an uphill battle. We all want what's best for our children, but what that best looks like varies for every one of us. Momma-Sota is your passport to the unfiltered, unapologetic world of momming. No perfectly edited snapshots or unattainable ideals here. We're here to share the ups and downs, the triumphs and tantrums, the mess and the beauty of being a mom. Join me as we explore the raw and authentic side of parenting. This is your safe space to vent, laugh, and learn as we navigate the unpredictable journey of raising strong, capable, and independent children for the future. Hey mamas, welcome to today's episode of Momma-Sota. It's me, your host, Monica Eickman. I am a stay-at-home mom of 3 amazing children. Growing up, I always knew I wanted to be a mom, but the idea of being a stay-at-home mom didn't even cross my mind until I became pregnant with my first. Whether you are a working mom or a stay-at-home mom, we all face struggles and judgment at some point along the way. Joining us today is special guest Tesla Kasten. Like me, Tesla stays home with her 3 children, but her day-to-day is so much more than that. Welcome, Tesla, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're going to dive into kind of the main topic of being that homemaker. But before we kind of get going along that path, just go ahead and introduce yourself to us and your family.
Yeah, I'm a stay-at-home mom, like you said. I homeschool my 3 children. I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And my husband works from home also. So we're just kind of in it together all day, which is nice, but also difficult. I think a lot of people can relate to that. But so I'm also an artist. I've taken a break from, trying to do my own creative pursuits for the last few years. I think birth and pregnancy is its own creative pursuit in some ways, so it takes a lot of your attention. But lately I've been diving back into figuring out like what my work is, and it's been exciting and also scary. Yeah. So that's me in a nutshell, I guess.
So you had said that previous to that, you're an artist. What kind of art did you do?
Yeah, so I went to school for fine arts, so I've done a little bit of everything. What I've loved the most is like darkroom photography and also painting. Yeah, I think I'm more interested in like the concepts of art than the medium, so it's kind of just like whatever thing would do best. Like right now I'm really into the idea of video and like filmmaking, so yeah, I kind of hop around a little bit.
And then you were also prior a doula, correct?
Yeah, I was. I was a doula for a couple years before I had my first kid, and then I've been able to attend like mostly like friends' births since then. So I've been out of the birth scene for years, but it's funny because I feel this like dual calling to like birth work and art. So that's been part of my process of like, okay, what can I actually do right now? Especially when I'm in the throes of like young children.
Right.
That's kind of hard.
Yeah, you said 7, 5, and 2?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to, like I said, kind of focus today mostly on you have a passion for what you've called shame-free homemaking, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
So let's kind of let's just start with kind of some definitions. Let's start first with functional homemaking. How would you define that for your space?
Yeah, I think that coming into when I first had my own home out of my parents, I had a lot of like moral or like shoulds on myself of like, oh, well, this should look a certain way or this needs to have this because that's just how you do it. Kind of this like rule book that I had in the back of my head. And especially the last few years, I've been learning from a lot of people online about like making your space more functional for you and making your house serve you rather than you serving your house. Because I think that a lot of the cleaning resources that are pretty popular really are focused on like, well, this needs to look this way and you need to do these chores on this day. And I found a lot of freedom in just making it be like, okay, this is a building that's supposed to make my life better or easier and not a building that I'm in service to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I've been trying to focus on just like, okay, maybe this room is supposed to be a living room, but maybe it would function better as a dining room. So then just playing with that freedom of like, how do I actually use this space and how can it make it my life easier?
I love that because I think
Yeah.
so much across all aspects of life is everything's put into, like you said, these boxes or these areas of how it's supposed to be. And we're living up to these standards, and it doesn't have to be that way. And even just the other day, I said to my husband, we were talking, I think it was about breakfast, but I had said, well, why isn't spaghetti a breakfast food?
Totally.
And I don't want to eat spaghetti for breakfast, but had we
Yeah.
grown up that way and had that been the norm, then I don't think we'd look at it
Yes.
so crazy, like,
Totally. Yes,
or
totally.
like
I
in
agree.
America, it's normal for us to eat cow, but everyone thinks of buffalo as like a little bit more exotic. But that's, again, it's those social norms and those social constructs.
Yes, totally. I agree. Yeah, I think that I've found that it's been like I found there's a lot of things in my homemaking journey that have been really isolating or like difficult. And instead of to make that about me, like, oh, well, I'm not working hard enough, or oh, I must not have the skill set as that other mom. I'm trying to like kind of zoom out and be like, okay, what resources do they have that I don't have? Or even like you said, like what is our culture and our society? How is it making it hard for me? Like is it really my fault, or is it maybe this rule that I have or this way that we do things isn't really working, you know?
I love that. A lot of the kind of the thought with starting Momma-Sota was looking at, especially in the age of social media, as you see the TikToks and the Facebook Reels, and even just like the Hollywood Kardashian stuff or whatever's on TV. And it's like you said, these picture perfect homes, these picture perfect lifestyles, these children that are dressed to the nines. And we forget, like you said, what resources do they have that are allowing that lifestyle? Is it nannies? Is it more money? Is it editing? Like, is that even real?
Oh, yes, totally. It's so true. And I think like I grew up in like the MySpace, Instagram, like I've been a part of it for like since I was a teenager. So it is hard because there is like I said, like a creative thing for me that I found fulfillment in some of the social media things of like, oh, it's really nice to curate this scene to like make it a beautiful photo, and like that gives me my creative fulfillment. But like you said, yeah, it's there's a lot more behind the scenes that we don't get to see. And so it's hard because I don't want to like take away from other people's like creative practice. It's like, yeah, I don't want you to, if you don't want to post your dirty laundry on the internet, you don't need to, but you have to like remind yourself that that's like probably in the background, you know?
100%. So then the other part, so that's kind of the functional side. The other part of it, how you have it designed or labeled, is shame-free homemaking. So what's kind of that piece of it?
Yeah, so I've been in some online spaces for like neurodivergent people and homemaking, and I've found a lot of freedom in like taking away the shame of making things more functional. So there's an author, Casey Davis. She wrote How to Keep House While Drowning. Have you heard of that
I have not. I'm definitely going to look into it,
book?
though.
Okay. Yeah, it's really great. But there's a group I'm in on Facebook of like neurodivergent people that focus on just cleaning and cooking. And her book gets recommended like all the time. But basically, she goes along that same thought process that like your house should serve you and like to take away shame from things. And she even goes further of like if you need to do have paper plates to function, like if dishes are too much for you and they're overwhelming, like there's some freedom and there's no shame in like making sure you're taken care of. And so just maybe like unlearning more of those things of what I need to do to be able to like move through my day well and not make it so difficult. Maybe there's some things that I would feel really bad about, like you said, food is a huge one. Like if my kid is eating a certain way, like there's so much pressure and shame you can feel about stuff like that. And so with my house, just not focusing on making it look picture perfect, like you were saying, but taking away some of the shame of like, well, if we do need paper plates to function for the next week because it's a difficult week, like that's fine. You know, there's no moral thing here. You're not a bad human, you know?
Yeah, there's, like you said, there's so much of that with, and it will go both ways. You know, it will be, you should not use the paper plates because why don't you have time to do the dishes? Plus you're killing the planet. And then on the other side, it's like you said,
Exactly.
I should use paper plates because my mental health is better. And when my mental health is better, I'm a better mom. I'm more present for my family. So isn't that more important? And it's like,
Exactly.
it doesn't matter.
I think it's
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I think it goes back to that bigger question too of like, is it my fault on a personal level, or are there things in a bigger picture that I can't control that are making it hard for me? So it's a balance of like, yeah, is this my personal shame that I'm just not doing it right or doing it good enough, or is it maybe like a cultural or a system thing that like I can't really control on a huge level? So balancing like what I should be suffering in and what actually is like beneficial, you know what I mean? Because it's a lot of it. Yeah, it's a lot of work to be at home with your kids, and so I think that you have to play a game all the time of like what's the most worth it like thing for me to focus on.
And would you say too, then when we're talking about homemaking and then
Yeah.
the term of stay-at-home mom, do you put those interchangeable? Do you have differences that you would define amongst those?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. My dad lives on his own, and I've been thinking a lot about like gender and stuff like that too, but he has a home and he has it by himself. And so he's a homemaker just as much as I am, you know. And so I am a stay-at-home mom also, but I do think homemaker is a separate thing. I think honestly every human is a homemaker because everyone has a place that they're trying to make to help them survive. And I think that I've been thinking a lot about what that means for different kinds of people, like for single guys that are just like fresh out of college, or like older couples without children. Just like there's so many different types of people, and I think that everyone can benefit from like learning about homemaking or being inspired by it. But I do think it gets put in a box where it's only moms that have to take up that responsibility.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we're so burnt out is that we're trying to carry that whole load of making like beautiful, warm homes for everyone, you know?
Yeah, I go back to, I think with just our society in general, like everything's always changing. We're always evolving. We're revolutionizing things. We're coming up with new inventions. We're shifting back and forth actually from moms being home, staying with the kids. Then it was, full steam ahead. Moms are in the workforce, and we're kind of shifting back to some of that more,
Mm-hmm.
not all moms obviously, but more of that stay-at-home mom picture again. And I think with that sometimes the definitions have to change.
Totally.
And so it's like,
Yeah.
what was a homemaker in the 50s and what's a
Mm,
homemaker now?
totally.
And
Yeah.
then even
And
just like
yeah,
what within different areas, states, groups of people, a homemaker in like the Amish world is not necessarily going to be the same thing as a homemaker in, that more industrial setting.
totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think honestly I've been thinking a lot about how important home is in general, and I think a lot of everything stems from that. Like if you can cuz for me, like the foundation of your home is just a place where you feel safe and cared for. And I think that if more people would focus on that, then it probably would hopefully solve a lot more problems in a bigger picture. You know what I mean? Like if everyone felt like they had a place that where their needs were met, I think it would change a lot, you know? And so I think broadening that definition would definitely help. If my dad thought of himself as a homemaker, like how much more healthy of a person would he be if he was able to like create a space where he felt really, you know, warm and safe.
And
So yeah.
With that, I was going to say, even when you said that you think everybody in a sense is a homemaker, that kind of like flipped a switch a little bit for me, because when we define ourselves, I think sometimes it's those boxes, and you don't have
Mm-hmm.
to be all in one box or all in another box or split it. It's all a bunch of parts that make up who we are. And if I were
Mm-hmm.
to myself explain, who I am, even at the beginning, I never say I'm a homemaker. I say I'm a stay-at-home mom. And when I speak to
Yeah.
people, I say I'm a stay-at-home mom, or sometimes joking, I say I'm retired, which, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's not
Yeah.
even true. Like, I've got real estate investments, so I guess technically I'm a landlord, which I never describe myself as that. And, my husband owns a
Right.
business that I am a part of, but it's like I always just focus on that main title of stay-at-home mom. And
Mm-hmm.
the only time I check the box of homemaker is on a survey, when that's kind of stay-at-home mom's not listed, but homemaker is. So I'm like, okay, I guess I
Totally.
have to
Yeah.
check that box.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, if
Yeah.
we
I
look
feel
at it
that.
that way, we can just,
Totally. I think it's hard too, because I think that in some ways having that one label does put you in a box where you don't feel the freedom to do more than just that. And I think that if stay-at-home moms were given more resources or support, they would have the capacity to do more than just caregiving all day. And I think that we kind of limit ourselves, and we've been limited by just being like, well, caregiving for my kids all day, that is just my main work. And I think it is, and it is a lot of work, especially if you don't have any support. But I guess the thing I've been thinking about a lot is, how do we make it not all or nothing? How do we give it more space to have nuance, that like I could still be a stay-at-home parent and also have some sort of work, like I said before, and maybe have childcare for just a couple hours a week. Does that still make me a stay at home parent? Like, I think there's so much more nuance that we don't let happen. And then I think that we limit possibilities for people to contribute a little bit more.
and that kind of goes right into, so the societal pressures. We have homemaking, we have motherhood, and like we
Mm,
talked about before, the both sides of the argument, or both sides, there's judgment either way, not
totally.
necessarily from everybody, but the working mom saying, oh, it must be so nice to stay home, and the stay-at-home mom saying, oh, it must be so nice to get a break from your kid.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, why can't we have both? Like, I think that's been my biggest hang up in figuring out what I want to do is, why do I have to be away from my children for 10 hours a day to have some sort of creative pursuit? Can't I figure out a way to do both? And I think the pandemic and working from home and all of those kind of things, and like remote work, and I feel like just our concept of work is shifting a little bit, of like, is it a clock in clock out 8 hours thing? Does that mean you're working, or can it be more fluid? Like, can you be home at times during the day with your kids, or can you go do, like, does it have to be all or nothing?
So with the all or nothing, I've I was part of a Facebook group that was designed for, I don't know if it was stay-at-home moms specifically or stay-at-home parents, but
Mm,
someone had posted, I don't know if it was a comment or their own post, but essentially they were working for 4 hours or
mm,
something like that. And they got kicked out of the group because,
wow.
according to group rules, you are not a stay-at-home mom because you
Wow.
work 4 hours or whatever craziness it
Oh.
was. And I'm
And
thinking,
it just like demeans the amount of work they are doing, because like that's not a big break, 4 hours a week, you know what I mean? Especially like being a stay-at-home parent when it's a 24-hour job, you
yeah,
know?
and I was just like, so you
Oh,
think that they have nothing to offer the group, or aren't we
totally.
here, like it's a support group so that we can offer our advice, our suggestions, be there for each other, and we're just like, nope, cut off at the knees.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes it does become an echo chamber where the people that are deep in the throes of, like, they have no support, so they are always on, they always have to be the main parent. They don't, like, we cut off the opportunity for them to maybe be more healthy and get some support, cuz it's like, for me personally, we do have childcare 4 hours a week. And if I didn't have that before, I wasn't good at my stay-at-home parent job. And I think that some people think they have to suffer in order to be like doing it right. And I guess my goal is like, I mean, I want to enjoy this. I don't want to suffer the whole time. Like I think it's all a worthy effort and a good work, and I really love doing it, but does it have to be hard? Like does it have to be something that's all consuming, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it comes back to, like you said, the home is a space for us to function in. So
Yeah.
that same with like what's the ultimate decision, or what was the driving force for you to be a stay-at-home parent? And if that main component is to be present for your children, or to raise them kind of more yourself the way you want to, that sort of thing, then, well, like you said, what good is that if you're just angry, crabby, like you said,
Resentful.
suffering the whole time? Then are you really being the parent you want to be, or would you be a better parent for only 2 hours at the end of the night working outside the home?
Yeah. Or can it be in the middle too? Because I think I've struggled with that of like feeling like I have to choose like only 2 hours. And I feel like there should be a way where we can do like multiple options. Like there's got to be more room for space and nuance where we can get kind of the best of both worlds. And I mean, maybe that's wishful thinking, but I think it's kind of a response to, I don't know if you've felt this, but a lot of the like older generation, like my parents or my grandparents, when I started having kids, have had this attitude of like, oh well, I had to do it this way, so, and it was like really hard and difficult, and it's almost like they want me to have to suffer. I don't know if you felt that, but like my mother-in-law especially was like really upset that my husband had parental leave. And I think it's because she was jealous because she had to just, her husband went back to work right away and she had to do it all by herself. And I have this feeling that they're like, well, I had to do it this hard way, so you should have to do it this hard way. And I think I have this like gut reaction of like, no, I don't want to. Like, I want to figure out a way that actually is enjoyable and like doesn't burn me out. Yeah.
No, and I think, like you said, I think a lot of it does stem, even when people don't realize it, but that a lot of it does stem from jealousy. Again,
Yeah, for
both
sure.
sides of the coin.
Yeah.
We live in this modern times, and a lot of like the women in power, movement and all of that, and the equal rights. And, guys are very much gentlemen's and all of this. But even still, my brother-in-law, when my sister and brother-in-law had their first child now 9 years ago, he stayed home and my sister continued
Okay.
to work. And now they're coming up on having their fourth, and it's finally flipped. He's working now and she's going to be staying home. But even I just think of like, I already get the judgment or the shame, like you said, of being a stay-at-home mom. But
Mm-hmm.
when he was a stay-at-home dad, even people who had no questions of me being a stay-at-home mom, they would question, like, why is he being a stay-at-home dad? And it's like,
Yeah.
why does that matter? It worked for them
Yeah.
financially, who had the better paying job to continue to, run the household, how it was going to work out. And so it's just like, again, that jealousy, or that double-edged sword of
Yes.
when it's okay and when it's not
Totally.
okay.
Yes, totally. I think too, there's a bit of it where we don't value kids, or we don't value like caregiving. Like even for like older folks, like my grandma is older, and we are talking now about like, oh, what's this going to look like when you can't live alone? And I think that we just don't have a lot of value for like caring for people, especially young children, and we don't value them as people as much. And so I think anyone, even teachers probably get that, or like childcare workers, but it's like that's one of the most important tasks we can do as a society, is like make sure our children grow up well.
Yeah.
And so I think there is like an undervalued thing about like, and especially if a man does it, it's like, oh, well, that's like a low form of work. Why are you doing that?
Yeah. And again, with the double standard, though, staying home as a stay-at-home dad, like you said, it's kind of judged of like, well, why are you, doing that? Don't you should, be taking care of your home and your wife and kids. But
Yeah.
then flip it around and mom is at the park with the kids, and that's just kind of normal. Dad's at the
Yeah.
park with the kids, and it's like, wow, you're such a great involved dad.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
How do
I
we have
mean,
that?
I know. And I've like we've done a lot of work to have more fair like split of tasks in our relationship. But even so, sometimes like if I'm in a new place with like new people that I don't know very well and I say, "Oh, hey Blaine, could you go change this poopy diaper?" I feel that like shame or whatever, and I don't even know if the people are doing it, but it's almost this like expectation that people are like, why wouldn't you go do that?
Yeah.
Like,
Especially because you
why
asked,
would
so it's like you noticed it. Why didn't
yeah,
you do it?
exactly, yeah. So finding the balance of being like, how do we share this, and how, because it almost feels sometimes like he is doing more labor than I am, and I'm like, are you really, or is it just more equal?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because you, like you said, you feel that innate pull that you should be doing these
Yeah.
things, and why?
Through all of
Why?
it. Yeah, exactly. We've done a lot of this with homemaking too. Is there? Have you heard of Fair Play?
Nope.
It's
Enlighten me.
like okay, that's a great one too. But it's one of my favorite resources. But they go through like how to split up tasks in your household, and they even go into like the mental load stuff,
Mm-hmm.
or like creating magic for your kids, all of those things that take up a lot of effort and brain power that we don't really have words for very much. Like my husband has taken over the tooth fairy, and even just like that little bit is like so helpful to me because I don't have to do all that like prepping ahead or like planning and figuring it all out. But Fair Play is great because it has a card deck where you can like sort out in piles different tasks and kind of see who is carrying what. And their whole thing is like it shouldn't have to be equal, because there's times where like yeah, your partner does work outside the home, or maybe one of you has like a medical thing that's happened or something like that. It should be fair. And I think that for a lot of women, especially stay-at-home moms, it hasn't really been fair.
I was going to say, mental load is something that I hadn't really heard ever before. I think it was something that, it was there, but being defined or labeled as that until I would
Totally.
say the last 6 months to a year. But I feel
Yeah.
like I see it or hear it within that last 6 months to a year multiple times a week now.
Really?
Yeah,
That's kind of exciting.
it is. It is. And it's one of those where, like you said, obviously it's always been there. But the fact
Yeah.
that we're talking about it means that like we're at least starting to move in the direction of being able to
Yeah.
do something about it.
Totally. And I like think of it, I'm hoping that people start to think of it even more creatively, that like does it always have to be the mom and the dad even? Like could the aunt take on some of these things, or could like the grandma or whatever. I think people have been doing it that way for a long time. I think that they just don't realize it. That there's probably a lot more support than what we think. It's just the mom and the dad by themselves.
Yeah, and I like too that you had said that the idea with that with the cards is it's not necessarily about equal, it's about fair. And I think sometimes that's a word or a thought that we use interchangeably, and to see that those are two separate things
Yeah.
would.
Yeah, that's even affected like my parenting a little bit too. To the whole like sibling stuff is
Mhm.
like, well, yeah, this isn't equal right now, but that doesn't mean it's not fair for both of you to have different experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, I ran into that yesterday with my son because
Yeah.
obviously I don't homeschool, and my oldest is 6.5, so he's in first grade
Oh, fun.
going to school, and then my 4-year-old and my almost 1.5-year-old are home with me.
Yeah.
Then
Oh, so
he's home, like you said, then during breaks and summer and all of that. But my daughter got to go to a trampoline park during the day the other day with the neighbor friend, and he was so upset about, and the same thing, that's not fair.
yeah.
And
luckily, because sometimes I'm just like, oh, shoot, this isn't fair. Where do I go with this? Where do I, but luckily, like it just popped in my head right away because we recently had a field trip. I go, what about the field trips you get to go on at school? Does your sister go to those? I was like, so it's not necessarily equal what you got to do, but is it fair?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think that's so helpful too. We were talking about like the jealousy bit with working moms and stay-at-home moms is like how nice would it be to not feel like you're not like to just to focus on your own thing and be like, am I getting what I need? Because I've been thinking a lot about, especially figuring out as an artist, like what work I want to do, like that jealousy thing, and being like, oh man, but they've done this, and it's like, well, what am I actually wanting or needing? Like, what does that jealousy tell me? And I think maybe for those moms, it could be like the stay-at-home mom is jealous because they just don't have any time to be alone or to work on something outside of tasks that get undone every 10 minutes, and so it's like you don't have to like try to make it equal, like you don't have to do that the thing that the other person's doing, but how can you make it more fair where you also get to meet that need of having something that feels like work that is like life-giving to you.
That's definitely, I think, like you said, a big piece is finding the meaning and value for yourself. And I think if we all focused on ourselves more, like you said,
Totally.
versus what does the other person have.
Totally. And I mean the fair play thing has actually been really I can't think of the word, but it's like made me feel more capable because a lot of so one of the philosophies of it is that if you own a task, it's your responsibility to like make sure it gets done. So for example, if I own the task of like cleaning the bathrooms and I'm not able to clean the bathrooms for some reason, it's my responsibility to find someone else that can instead of just like putting that on my partner. So it's nice because it gives me the power and the autonomy to be like, oh, okay, well if I do need like 4 hours a week, like we were talking about, to work on something that makes me feel like I'm creatively fulfilled, then it's my responsibility to like navigate and figure out how I can get that to happen. And instead of like a more victim mindset where you're like, well, I just have to be a stay-at-home mom and there's nothing I can do, and you know what I mean, and trying to like figure out solutions to make those things possible for yourself. So it's helpful for me because it gives me that power to be like, oh well, this is a need and I'm allowed to take care of it. I don't have to suffer.
So you're balancing the homemaking, the motherhood,
Yeah.
homeschooling, and the creativity.
Yeah.
How are you, like, what are some of the common challenges, and then how are you finding the solutions for them?
Yeah, I think so. We moved last year, and I feel like a lot of my systems that I had for my house kind of got thrown in the air. So I think my biggest challenge this last year has been putting all that stuff back into place. Because I think the way that I've been set up, if I have my spaces put together where I know where something is, like, oh, I know where the scissors are, then I have more freedom to like do more creative projects. And I haven't been able to have that space this year just because of moving and figuring out where I'm going to put all my paint stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's been the biggest challenge is getting those organization things back together. I've also, like I said before, taken a lot of time to be like, okay, what support do I need, and trying to figure that out. So it's been helpful to have like that little bit of childcare, or to even have a plan for myself that it's like, okay, I'm not going to be able to paint right now, but if I get this studio set up in like 3 months, I'll be able to do it. So it's almost like a delayed gratification thing too, of like this, there are seasons in being a stay-at-home mom where your creative practice is going to be way less, but I think that there's times where it can be really fruitful too. And so I think the time bit has been the biggest challenge of figuring out what are the little spaces of time that I can work on things, and also like what my best energy is put. So like for me, I can really do a lot of the like mental work and like clothes shopping and like curriculum planning, all that kind of stuff, I can do that at nighttime pretty easily. But in the morning is when I have the most physical energy. So that's when I need to be doing like more housework stuff or like, the actual like physical jobs. So I think that like one of the challenges or one of the benefits has been figuring out like, okay, what is my personal energy and where can I put the tasks that match that so that I kind of am more fluid throughout the day.
That's a good point, because I think sometimes, like you had mentioned at the very beginning with like cleaning in the home and the resources that are out there, I think people again are trying to fit those exact models rather than like take the model and then think about yourself and modify, because like you said, some people are like, I'm going to get up at 4 a.m. before my kids are awake and I'm going to work out and then I'm going to, power clean this. But if that is not like, if you getting up at 4 a.m. is just going to be you walking around at 4 a.m. and then being tired and exhausted at 7 or whatever it is when your kids get up, then that's silly to try to put, to put yourself into those shoes. Like those shoes don't fit you. Do them,
Yeah, exactly. And I think it changes so much because kids change so fast.
Mm-hmm.
So my routine or my, capabilities when my youngest was 3 months is totally different than now when she's 2. And like the amount of time you have during the day to just like when they're playing alone or when they need you to like do something every 20 minutes, it changes so much. So you have to kind of just be like open and curious and like paying attention and like experimenting all the time, which is also pretty exhausting.
You just got into a
I think
routine.
exactly. It's a lot of mental load like we were talking about.
Yeah, I'm in the midst of navigating some of that. Even just, when I started like the first recordings of the podcast and the timing that I kind of had set aside and when I would, prep myself and what my kids were doing while I was recording. And I'm even noticing right now, like my baby's sleeping right now in my arms, but she was whining and crying at the beginning of the episode. We're going through a shift right now at home. And I might need to, readdress some of my scheduling and how I'm going to fit things in better again. And I think, like you said, that being fluid, that it feels so great when you get into a rhythm and something's working. But being a mother, that's not just thinking that that's going to continue along the exact same path always. Like you don't have that.
I know. And I think that's part of a little bit of the jealousy of the work outside the home thing is it feels more consistent. And so I've been trying to think like, okay, what are some like consistent things we can have that that kind of keep us grounded? Because I think it is so hard because it does feel like everything is constantly changing all the time.
And I, like you said, pull in what is consistent. And it reminds me too of like the serenity prayer of knowing what you can control, what you can't control, and just, getting rid of the rest. Like I can control that I'm going to give my children breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I might not be able to control what times exactly that occurs all of the time because things come up, a nap changes, a sport gets thrown in the mix that changes dinner time. But just like you said, finding the consistencies and being comfortable with that control and letting go of some of the other things.
Totally. And I have realized that like there are some things that are way more consistent than I assumed they would be. Like we didn't have a consistent time we ate lunch really, but I just started to pay attention to when we were all hungry and it ended up being like the same time every day. So I was like, okay, like this is already happening. I just didn't pay attention to it and there was some comfort in that of like, oh, okay, like I am going to get this quiet time that everyone needs in the afternoon. And then I can be more present in the morning time if I know that I'm going to get that later. So that's what I'm saying with like setting up my studios. Like I can be satisfied right now that I'm not painting something because I know that in 3 months or something I'll be able to have the opportunity. So it's I think paying attention to just how it is has given me more like comfort that it's like okay there are things that are consistent too. It's not everything up in the air all the time.
Yeah. And like you said, I think sometimes, instead of trying to create the schedule and force things into that, like you said, go with that flow and see where things land, then you can place them better.
Yeah. And I think the shame part is a part of that too, with like making your home how it needs to be, is like making, like, different people have different energy levels and like capacities. And so I think with the, like, being a part of those neurodivergent groups online has been really nice, because it's given me a lot of freedom to be like, okay, how much capacity do I really have compared to my partner? And like, he has more physical energy than I do, so having him do some more tasks is fair. And just like, and not having the shame of like trying to be like every other family, but being like, okay, our living room needs to be a dining room, and my partner needs to carry this physical task, and maybe we eat lunch, or we eat dinner at like 4 p.m. instead of 5 p.m. You know what I mean? Just being like, what needs to happen for the people in my family, instead of trying to be like all these other families.
That's, super important, because I even just talking with my neighbors about a multitude of different topics is it a lot of times when we get down to that nitty gritty of, like you said, why are we upset about whatever the situation is? And it comes down to like that rat race of, it's because we're comparing to somebody else's life rather than what works for our household.
Totally. And I think there's part of that is like the isolation of being a stay-at-home parent, is like you're in your house alone all day for the most part. And I think that as humans, we need that like social, like almost co-regulation of being like, hey, you're doing a good job. Like, you're doing it. This is great. And I think it's hard because the only time that a lot of parents get that is looking at social media, but then you're also getting all of that comparison. So I feel like the isolation bit, where we don't have those like real relationships, like you were saying with your neighbors, like how cool to be able to have those in-person conversations where you can be like, yeah, you don't have to do that, you're doing a great job, look at what you're doing, you know. And I think a lot of parents don't have that. I think they're kind of just guessing and being like, I don't know if this is what I should be doing, you know.
And as with that, like you said, remembering how it feels to you when someone notices your accomplishment or your sacrifice or whatever that is then flipping that switch to be like, well, you can be that person for somebody else. Like you said, if they share that moment with you, to tell them they're doing great as they are. You know, don't worry about that I did it this way. Does that work for your family? Then great.
Exactly. And I mean, like, yeah, like you said, everyone has the dirty laundry that's hiding. You know, it's like this mom might be really good at food, and then this mom might be really good at decorating or whatever. And yeah, and I think that I wish that we lived in a society that was more able to be like community, because then I feel like we could rely on each other to fill in those gaps too, of like, oh, well, I really suck at food, so like, can I have you help me, because you're really great at it, you know. And I think that social media does that a little bit, but I think that, like you said, it's a little too polished, where we don't get to see anyone's real life, you know.
And I was going to say, and then you have the people that are trying to show the other side of things, and then you get the judgment, or you get the like, it gets to be like too much of an extreme, where it's like the dishes are piled up and the laundry is here and the kids are running around feral and there's this, and then it's like, again, then you have, it's like, well, are we trying to like go the opposite direction, or like where?
Totally, yeah. I think that's really true.
So
it's been nice for me to be I'm a part of like a mom's forest school group, and we have a lot of these conversations. Yeah, and it is so nice to have like those real connections. And I think a lot about how much I wish that I could just like walk outside and be like, hey, how'd you sleep last night? You know. Yeah, exactly.
No, those conversations are important though, and like you said, it's something that when someone does it for you, it feels so fantastic. So again, sometimes it's like that self judgment or thought. It's like, well, why don't I say that to somebody else?
Yeah, and I haven't thought of that a lot for myself, but you're totally right. I think that I quickly go to, oh, they're so good at cooking, I'm so bad at cooking, I need to be better, instead of just being like, wow, you're so good at cooking, like, look at this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I wonder how different it would be if we didn't just automatically like put it on ourselves, and if we just let us be separate people and be like, wow, awesome job.
Yeah,
Like,
I
how
can
many
build you
more?
up and I don't have to tear myself down.
Totally, yeah.
So I just want to, this is kind of along the line. So this might be an interesting one for all the moms listening to think about is it's not everybody, but I think it's quite common that the moms take a lot of the pictures. And so we're out of a lot of pictures, even though we're present in so many things, especially if we're the stay-at-home mom, like we're with our kids all day long. And in one of my forest groups, I had a mom, I was, playing with my kid, just doing whatever. And she snapped a picture of us and she sent me it, and she sent a text and she goes, if you're anything like me, I assume you don't have any pictures like this, even though you do this all day long. And it was the sweetest gesture. And so I've tried to make an effort, and I even forget, but like when I see a different, mom, whether it's in my forest group, and not just like a total creep at the park, like taking a picture of a stranger, in your
Yeah.
community and your forest group people, of thinking mentally like this is something that they do weekly, daily, interacting with their child, and they are not in that picture ever. And so I try to snap that picture and then send it to them. And I think if we all, like one little thing, like, I should try that. Like,
Yeah, because I do think we're all being witnessed, but it's not like, it feels like everyone's looking at us and judging us instead of like everyone's looking at us and supporting us. Yeah. And it is a lot of that work that's like even I just think about like, oh, I'm changing diapers all day or doing dishes all day, and it's all those tasks that people don't value. So they're like, why would I take a picture?
and it's like, well, that's the reality of what we're doing. That's the interaction. That's
Totally. And it's so important. Like I said before, every human needs to eat and have clean clothes and a bed. You know what I mean? It's like the foundation of all of our lives. And so yeah, so I think that if we could all value it a little bit more and notice it and be like, hey, like this is actually so helpful. Like how much more satisfaction would we feel, you know? And I think that's kind of the reason why people do gravitate towards social media, is they just want to be witnessed in all the work they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, be like, hey, I did this, it happened, you know?
So with your creative side of things too, you've talked about, painting and getting a studio set up. But in some of our background stuff, you've mentioned a children's album. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been thinking more about how I can integrate my work with my like mom work, because I think that I've been trying, like we were talking about, the dichotomy of like, oh, am I going to focus on this career, or am I going to focus on my children? And I really do want my homeschooling and my caregiving to be my main job. And so I was like, how can I do a creative project that's going to support that but still give me an outlet that's a little bit different mentally than like figuring out all the specifics of like care stuff. And so I was thinking a lot about like children's media, and we love like Bluey, and there's some really cool like children's artists like the Okie Dokie brothers and stuff like that. And we've loved that as a family, and I do feel like there's a need for more family friendly content that's like actually inspiring to the adults as well as the kids, because I feel like a lot of the kid content, just like I can't stand it. And I'm like, especially as an artist, it's like, oh, this animation is terrible, or oh my gosh, the story in this is just ridiculous. And so I've been thinking a lot about like, okay, well maybe I can just make something that like is like songs that we would love to listen to every day, or songs that wouldn't, you know, annoy me if I heard them 50 million times. And my husband is a musician also, and so it's kind of fun to dream up this project where maybe we can work together. And part of my goal too is like to make an album and then also make videos, like films that go along with each song, kind of like a music video, but also like a kid's show. So I'm in the beginning stages of figuring it all out. And I think figuring out like the resources, like, okay, who could play this instrument, or all of that stuff has been kind of fun behind the scenes. But I'm trying to keep myself accountable to doing a project and actually finishing it.
Yep. Yeah.
So I'm like, here's one that I feel like could be one that I could actually finish and not something that takes too much of my attention away from being a mom.
And I was gonna say, that's awesome because it takes, like you said, your creative side, your artistic side, combines it with your homemaking, your stay-at-home mom, keeping your family, your children, your husband, rather than saying, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but rather than saying, oh, I'm going to go train to be in this bodybuilding competition, where that doesn't include, the time that you have.
Totally, yeah. And for some people, that might be what they need, is to just shut their brain off.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I just get so immersive that I'm thinking about it all the time in every way. And so I didn't want to feel like I was not present in my normal life. You know what I mean? I was like, maybe this in some ways will make me more present because I'll be paying attention more to like little things the kids do, or paying attention more to like how we're all feeling, and if there's something that would be useful in a story, you know what I mean?
Yeah, to incorporate all of that.
Yeah, totally.
So before we kind of wrap up then, is there anything else along the lines of whether it's your passion for the functional and shame-free homemaking, motherhood, the artistic side, anything else you want to kind of include or tell our listeners here?
Let me think for a second. I think what it gets down to is that we all want to be in relationships with each other in a way where we feel supported. And I think that a lot of us feel like we're all imposters, and that, like we were talking about earlier, having more genuine connections where we feel like we can support one another and use each other's strengths and weaknesses will make it all feel fair to everyone. I think that the more that we can practice that in our homes and then in our neighborhoods and just like on those scales, the easier it'll feel for people to feel like they can be themselves and also feel like they're supported in being themselves. Yeah. So yeah,
I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. Like you said, if we're a stay-at-home mom, if we're a homemaker, if we're a work-from-home mom, if we're a traditional in the office working mom, whatever that may be, and like even if we're a combination of those things, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. We're working towards, for the most part, I mean, we all have a little nuances, but we're working towards that same goal of raising our children to be that next generation, like we talk about. So it doesn't have to look the same for everyone. It needs to work for your family. It needs to function, like you had said, for your inner circle.
Totally. And I have hope that it doesn't have to feel like suffering.
Yeah.
That's my main through line, is like, I have hope that this can all feel life-giving to everyone.
I love that. Well, Tesla, thank you so much for sharing this with us. This was a very heartfelt conversation.
Oh, yeah. This was awesome. Thank you. It was so much fun.
Yeah. And thanks, of course, all of our listeners, because what's a podcast without some of them?
Definitely.
So until next time, all of you mamas, keep doing your best.
Thank you for joining me on this roller coaster of momming right here on Momma-Sota. I hope you enjoyed our candid conversation about all things parenting, where perfection is left at the door and real life takes center stage. Stay tuned for more heartfelt, unfiltered discussions in the next episode. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review Momma-Sota on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us. Until next time, this is Monica Eickman signing off. Keep rocking that mom life, and remember, you've got this.